Lots of fools basically believe that Saudi Arabia and its government really were sincerely holding on to Islam and there are the Muslim leaders that should be obeyed. The United States wants Israel to be fully integrated within the Arab family in the Middle East. Israel has a greater interest than money.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to i3 Pulse. Today, can Hajj mean unity when Muslim suffering is ignored and silence is enforced? Is Vision 2030 reform or Western-backed plan to secularize the Ummah? And finally, who's really leading the Muslim world? And what are they quietly preparing us for? Today on i3 Pulse. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Assalamu alaikum.
How you doing?
Good, alhamdulillah.
So, Sheikh, there was a recent incident just this past week where all these Middle Eastern diplomats were supposed to visit, Palestinian Authority in West Bank, and they were blocked by Israel. So, is this a genuine setback or a maneuver from Israel? What's going on? Is this a tension based on what's going on in Gaza? Like, what's going on here?
Well, first, we need to understand basically the political players, right? Like the Arab Gulf leaders and the regional Arab leaders are not really on the side of Gaza. None of them are on the side of Gaza. Nobody. Like, they don't care about Gaza. If Gaza could evaporate, this is the best thing that could ever happen from their perspective. Sadly, it's there, so they have to deal with it. And they're not there basically to try to save it or try to save its people or save the land. Nothing. So that move was basically a move to really discredit Netanyahu. And that's why basically the Israeli government and Netanyahu government basically acted predictably that, no, you're not doing that, we're not going to let you in. Really, basically, that's the only thing. It was basically putting Netanyahu a little bit more in the corner because, as you can see, basically Netanyahu is like, giving the hand to everybody, to Trump, to the Arab leaders, to the negotiations. And the Trump administration right now is putting a little bit more pressure. The European leaders started putting lots of pressure on Israel right now. Let's see. At the end of the day, it's like I want the viewer to understand very well that when the American administration or the European leaders or the Arab leaders, whomever, all these three, put pressure on the Israelis and Netanyahu, not because they're trying to save Gaza, not because they love human rights, not because they care about life or the children being killed, the civilians being killed. They don't care about any of that. It's not even a variable in their equations. It doesn't exist. At best it's just collateral damage. It's a pawn on the chessboard. So they care about their image. They care about basically their interest. That there's no other thing. And again, I just want the viewer to understand that these European leaders and the American administration or the Arab leaders, when they try to put any pressure on the Israeli government, it's not because they believe in human rights. Nobody believes in human rights. This is just, sadly, it's just a way to delude. They're just trying to basically control their population with these slogans of democracy and human rights. And the conflict has been there for 2 years. 60,000 kids, women, and innocent civilians have been slaughtered. And these are just the verified numbers. And there's 150,000 wounded people, lots of disabled. And, there's humanity. There's no humanity in these leaders, to say the least. So we just need to understand that these moves are just political maneuvers. So we need to understand the interests of these countries. And then when you understand the interests of these countries, the political actions will make more sense. Okay? Viewing it as just how the media is trying to frame it is very dangerous because you'll be controlled through the media.
So just to clarify on this point then, is Saudi Arabia's demand for a two-state solution, number one, either a genuine precondition or a strategic leverage point? And if it's just them it's not something genuine, what are they doing it for?
Look, the Israelis do not believe in a two-state solution.
So is it possible, like with this government, or is it impossible now? And what's Saudi trying to do?
I think with Netanyahu it's impossible. And it's just with Netanyahu. I think like you need the old left leadership like Ehud Barak and Olmert. These are the real followers of American strategy, right? So the current hawkish administration is definitely not subservient fully to American foreign policy demands, which is why there's tension. Like there is tension, but this tension is tactical. It's not strategic. Strategic, basically, the existence of Israel is strategic. The support of the state of Israel from the American perspective and the European perspective is strategic. So that cannot be compromised. So the issue is basically on the tactics. So, for example, Netanyahu wants Gaza to be emptied The Americans don't have a problem with that. They have a problem with how to empty it. So Netanyahu wants to force people out. The Americans said, look, we can let them basically bit by bit leave, or, at least basically we can have a different solution. They would ask the questions like, what is the objective you're trying to achieve? Well, the Israelis want the land. What are you going to do with the people? Well, the Israelis say, well, take him to Sinai, take him to Egypt, push him out.
So UAE has normalized, right? And Saudi Arabia hasn't officially, even though they work together, but Saudi Arabia hasn't gone to that full extent. Now, my question is, if it's just lip service, what's holding Saudi back, and what do they need? What are they looking for to do this? Because there's clearly, if they didn't need anything, they would have just normalized already. So what's the holdup?
Well, the holdup is from the Israeli side of the story, really, because the Saudis are ready for normalization. I mean, the objective of the Saudi internal policy and external policy is the American project. Like Saudi Arabia implements what the American administration wants from a social and political geostrategic perspective. And some people might basically have a hard time swallowing that, because they think of nations as totally independent. They're not. Not every nation is independent. Saudi Arabia is not an independent state. Saudi Arabia is fully protected by American military might. And the thing is, basically, Trump went and said it, didn't he? When he visited Saudi Arabia, it's like, if you guys wouldn't exist on the map if it wasn't for America. There's no, sometimes, these things used to be analysis before. They're just facts now. Trump, I like his style. He's direct. So you can't be in such a position without your protector making demands. The United States does not. The United States wants a liberal Saudi Arabia. They want Saudi Arabia to be like Dubai and Abu Dhabi. This is what they want: beaches and clubbings and concerts and WWF and WWE and so forth. They want the Western culture to be the dominant in society. Now, Saudi Arabia is a very, very conservative society, originally at least, to a certain extent, to be honest. So that's been changing. As you can see, Saudi Arabia fully changed in the last few years.
The majority of the country are youth.
Oh, yeah. Those who lived in Saudi Arabia, let's say in the 90s or the early 2000s, they cannot even recognize Saudi Arabia today.
Yeah.
That's how much change happened. And most of it happened in the last, 3 to 5 years. You see what I'm saying? So that's an American demand. And the Saudis are okay with it, because it's not as if they had any ties to the religion in the first place. If they did, see, the proof that they didn't before is that they let it go so quickly. If you really believed in Islam as a way of life, you just wouldn't just throw it in the garbage like that. But the Saudis did. Lots of fools basically believed that Saudi Arabia and its government really were sincerely holding on to Islam, and they are the Muslim leaders that should be obeyed. That's how foolish some people are. This is how politically naive people are. So they used to call for obedience to the leaders because the Ummah gave them bay'ah and so forth. Pledge of allegiance. That's craziness, like literally craziness. So today, I think there's no more. The facade the mask is off. That the Saudi Arabia is in the process of full liberalization. It's just step-by-step approach, but it's pretty, mashallah, sarcastically, in full force. In terms of the geostrategic, the foreign policy, Saudi Arabia wants to normalize with Israel. Why? Again, because it serves American interest. The United States wants Israel to be fully integrated within the Arab family in the Middle East.
So with Saudi Arabia, what's with all this focus on Saudi Arabia? Israel is strong. They don't really need Saudi Arabia's recognition. But how come there's always this rhetoric that Saudi Arabia is ready to normalize? Saudi Arabia, they're the first country that comes up in the Middle East.
Two reasons. Number one, it has a huge symbolism. Saudi Arabia is the home for the two holy sites in Islam. That's number one. So there is, again, due to we just spoke about it, there is some sense of followership within the Ummah to this regime due to the holy sites.
So this is Saudi Arabia is like the crown jewel for Israeli normalization.
It is, yeah. The second bigger thing in that is economics. Saudi Arabia has so much wealth. It dwarfs the other Gulf countries, which is why it's a leader within the whole Gulf because of that. It's a very large country compared to the other small ones with huge oil reserves, right? So when we see that Trump and America needed these countries for America's economy, which is maybe like, maybe 20 times bigger than Israel's, maybe more than that, So Israel needs the Gulf. So what Israel needs from Saudi Arabia is the contracts, the money, the business. You see what I'm saying?
Would it also help Israel beyond the contracts and the business relationship that maybe even domestic and international standing, like post this whole genocide, getting that normalization with these countries? That's kind of like the flag that Israel can wave, that like, look, you know what, like we're the good guys, we're not the bad guys. These guys didn't say anything, and we have good relationships with them. So with Israel's normalization, let's say with Saudi Arabia, let's say that happens, beyond the economic, beyond the business relationship, would it allow Israel to rehabilitate its image post this terrible genocide that's been going on?
I don't think so. I think don't forget, basically, people look at the Arab regimes as also as tyrants, tyrannical. It's not gonna help the image at all. It's not gonna improve. It's not gonna improve. It's not gonna make it worse, really, for most people, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. But at the end of the day, that's why basically, look, at the end of the day, Israel has a greater interest than money, which is the land. And that's it's a vital interest. So you need to understand the concept of vital interest for nations. Something that's vital national interest is an interest that the country would fight wars for. And they are fighting wars for. They're pushing back on the Americans. They're committing genocide in front of everybody while everybody's criticizing them. Because from their perspective, this is a vital interest. People need to understand that. Like when something is a vital interest, like the country would go into war. So that's what it is.
Now, talking about Saudi's internal kind of modernization and economics. So going back 9 years ago, Mohammed bin Salman made a very big announcement that shocked the world, which is this thing called Vision 2030. So from economic perspective, but can you explain a bit beyond the economics? What are the geopolitical and social goals behind this Saudi Vision 2030? And really, how does it redefine Saudi Arabia in the future?
No, there's no geopolitical goals at all. This was a trick. The reason Mohammed bin Salman had to announce this Vision 2030 is to trick the Saudi youth. The Vision 2030 is just a trick. It's literally a trick to create an illusion of development for the Saudi youth, to mobilize them towards his objective of liberalization. That's it. It's an internal, political move by Mohammed bin Salman to recruit the Saudi youth. And Saudi Arabia has a huge youth bulge, right? And to get them excited about the new Saudi Arabia, the modern Saudi Arabia. Like he wants to be that modern, he wants to be known in history as the founder of modern Saudi Arabia.
Damn.
You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, basically the vision in itself, it really has zero real goals. And right now, it's after 9 years, it actually failed. He even announced it's kind of failed, right? Like it's, maybe not directly, basically, because not going to say it's failed, but people in Saudi Arabia and have lots of connections there, they said it's failed. People are speaking already within the departments, within the government, within the business circles that it failed. There's not enough money for it because the money is being spent on American companies, right? Like, that $1 trillion plus that basically Mohammed bin Salman just spent. He didn't invest it in Saudi Arabia. He didn't invest it in the startup industry ecosystem. He didn't invest it in building the infrastructure. He didn't invest it in the universities and scientific centers and so forth. There is some stuff happening, but it's not enough. So it was all talk from the beginning. And people who understand politics in 2016, they knew this was fluff. You understand? We would have hoped, to be honest, I would have supported the modernization of Saudi Arabia from a scientific and technical perspective. Okay, but that was not the goal. The goal was liberalization, which every Muslim is against. Now, sadly, in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi citizen, the average citizen, is infatuated with the Western culture. This is something, sadly, it's a sad thing, but it is. The youngsters in Saudi Arabia, a good portion of them, right? They love the Western ideals and so forth, which is why the country's moved very quickly into liberalization. If that foundation wasn't there, the country wouldn't have been liberalized like this very quickly. You see what I'm saying? So there was no resistance because people really, a good portion of the population wanted it. But not everything, as you know, basically there's like these masked rebels on social media,
Yes,
basically. I
yes.
don't know if you heard about that, but
Yeah, so Sheikh, you mentioned this liberalization in Saudi Arabia. And a lot of people don't understand like how this is happening so fast, like a rapid social shift that we're seeing in Saudi Arabia, but also what happened in UAE from before towards secularization of the region. And I want to ask you a question. I want to get your thoughts on this. What's driving the change? Like, who is the brains behind this? Mohammed Salman of Saudi Arabia or MBZ of UAE? Like, who is the brains behind secularization of the Middle East?
bro, neither. It's not as if basically these guys, we said these countries don't own neither their internal policy nor foreign policy. These things come from think tanks in Washington, D.C. The studies to basically create less conservative, less Wahhabi, less Salafi societies in the Gulf has been in the think tank. It's been discussed in the think tanks in Washington D.C. for 20 years. It's just people don't read. That's the problem. So you know what happened. The way policy gets generated in the United States, the research happens within the think tanks, and these recommendations basically float inside the State Department. Okay, if it's policy, foreign policy related, if it's defense goes to the Pentagon, it goes to the different departments. Then the State Department basically have their own internal analysts. They take that research and they bake it, and they customize it to be a real policy recommendation to the president. The president at the end of the day, basically, he'll just follow the recommendation by the State Department. So the State Department basically, this file has been there for a long time. Those who read. But by the way, lots of this stuff is publicly available. Some stuff you might need to buy, but it's like a few bucks. And now it's time to liberalize Saudi Arabia. Okay, the United States from the beginning, and Bush Jr. said from the beginning, there's going to be a physical war against the Middle East, followed by an ideological war in the Middle East. Right, so this is what's been happening. So the first from 2001 till 2021, that was maybe the physical war. And as you can see, basically around that time, when the United States basically pulled out from Afghanistan, pulled out from Iraq, pulled out from all these other places. Right? When did the United States pull out of Afghanistan? 2019. Right? As just right after they signed the deal, basically during Trump's administration, and they pulled out during the Biden administration.
Yeah.
So as you can see, a few years before that, the next phase was being prepared, which is basically liberalization of the Gulf and the Muslim world. And that's why basically MBS announced it in 2016. UAE has that aggressive, Islam hateful stance, amongst everybody else. Qatar is the exact opposite. Qatar basically looks, Qatar and UAE are the exact polar opposites. The Qatari government basically seems to be the more loving to political Islam and Islamic activism and so forth than everybody else. And to be honest, maybe these positions might have, they could have came from Washington D.C. They could have basically been also something that has to do with the regime and how that regime have structured itself from a socio-political perspective within the country.
And you mentioned, right, that point about the Prime Minister of Qatar on Tucker Carlson's show when he was asked, why do you have those Hamas office in your own country? And he said, well, the U.S. told us to have it. Us to have it.
Yeah, God bless you. This is 100%. Like these regimes gets orders literally from the State Department. This is what you guys need to be doing. This blah blah, and they just execute it. What do you think? Like the base, the American base in Qatar, for example. It's so humongous. Forget it, yani. It's like forget about occupying Qatar. Through that base, they can occupy the Gulf and half of the Middle East.
Yeah.
So, people need to understand this is serious stuff. There's no speculation. There's no conspiracy theory. This is facts on the ground. You see what I'm saying?
And so the U.S. has an interest for this, and that's their plan. They've been speaking about this. Now, what's the benefit to these regimes to be very aggressive on making the Muslim liberalized and secularized? Because, when some Muslims see what the heck's going on here. Like there's parties, there's clubs, there's this, astaghfirullah, and some Muslims get very agitated by this. So what's the end goal? What is Saudi benefit?
Look, man, just people get agitated, they get smacked, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's how basically they think. Like they don't have a choice. These regimes are under the foot of America. Period. Okay, they can seem big and to be honest, Trump basically showed it what it is. Like he came in, they're like, "Yo, boys, we protect you. Otherwise, you're not on the map. You got to pay up. Come on, pay up."
Trillions of
Like,
dollars.
dude, the guy was like, it's like a gang leader, just like getting his what's it called, his
It's just like the protection money or extortion. This goes down and takes
extortions.
the
Yeah,
money from
yeah,
the
that's what
stores.
it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, see, so
So, Sheikh, this is a time of Hajj where it's a very big, significant time, for the Ummah. And really, if you look at Hajj, right, Malcolm X, when he spoke about it, he really was transformed by his Hajj when he said that he saw everyone the same, and it's how it stripped the Muslims of all their identity except for servitude to Allah. Now, how did Hajj become a stage where now the regime has the control and even the talk of the oppressed is like literally like prevented from being spoken about? Like, how did Hajj get to this point as an ummah?
well, sadly, bro, is because of the secularization of Islam. You know what I'm saying? The Hajj didn't get there because the government told people don't discuss. It's just people don't want to discuss because they were fed by many scholars that Islam is just about rituals and just keep it to yourself, pray and just be a good person and don't discuss politics. This is the message from many mullahs or molwis or shuyukh, call them whatever you want to call them. And this is definitely betrayal to Allah, His Messenger, and His Deen. The scholars are supposed to be the inheritors of the prophets, and the prophets were the ones who basically faced off with tyrants. The job of the prophets is to face off with tyrants. If the scholars are inheritors of the prophets, then they will be also taking the position of facing off with the tyrants. Period. This is the job of the scholars. But the scholars basically, that are employed by these governments within the different religious departments are, they're going to tell a different story. They're going to give you a more of a Christian-like Islam, or a Buddhist-like Islam, or a Hindu-like Islam, or it's all about, like, Christianity is the best example, really, because it was the before Islam was the right deen, it was the correct revelation of God, and was deformed by the priests and the priests and the rabbis and the priests and the pastors to become very secularized. You see what I'm saying? And who did that? The Roman Empire did that. Constantine did that. Constantine the Great, right? He literally secularized the Christian tawheed. First of all, made it polytheistic. Secondly, basically separated, give to Caesar what to Caesar, give to God what to God. No, definitely, he didn't invent that. But I'm just saying, basically, it became more the norm, even before Constantine, to be honest. Like the official Roman Church version of Christianity is a secularized version, okay, and the empire made that happen. And today, the empire, again, the American empire and the West in general, are trying to do the same thing with Islam. They want to just secularize. They want to do to Islam exactly what the Roman Empire have done to Christianity. The only bad news for them is that it's not going to happen. It will never happen because God, proclaimed that He has saved this specific deen, and it's going to be the right deen until the Day of Judgment. And the Muslim Ummah is 2 billion people. You can't fool them, right? You can't fool them. It's not as if basically 1 or 2 people know the truth. No, there's millions of people who know the truth across the Ummah. Okay, some of them are silent because they don't know what to say or how to say it. Some of them basically are saying it their way, but they're just scattered, not organized. Some of them have some organized, alhamdulillah, some organized effort, basically, alhamdulillah, which have led to some good fruits. That's why we have the Islamic awakening. We had the Islamic awakening as a result of loss of the work of the great scholars of Islam of the last century. In 1970, that decade is called the Islamic awakening within the Ummah in modern times. So alhamdulillah, and today basically the Ummah is again pushing for another awakening. You see what I'm saying? We're going to have an awakening every period of time, and we're close, inshallah, for another awakening. Hopefully, right now 2025. Hopefully by 2035, we'll have a serious awakening, right? So this is what we need. We need another awakening within an ummah-wide perspective, and the awakening we need today. See, back in the 1970s, the ummah came back to Islam as faith.
Yes.
Because the ummah almost dropped it.
So you're talking about like what? Like what was the opposition? Communism and stuff? Or
Yeah. People became communists. People became socialists. People became liberalists, nationalists, pan-Arabists. Whatever it is. Like people, like if you look at the let's take for example the number of hijabis in Egypt, which is a very conservative society. Compare the number of hijabis, or women who dressed with the headscarf, and in the 1940s, yeah, versus 1970s. Big difference.
Yeah.
Compared again between the 1970s and the 1990s, early 2000. I remember the 1990s. I was a grown man then, and there was a big wave of women across the Muslim world, across the Arab world in specific, who came back to the hijab. You know what I'm saying? Huge, significant numbers. Okay? So, alhamdulillah, basically, what we say basically, the 20th century was when the Ummah, the later half of the 20th century, is when the Ummah came back to Islam as faith. Alhamdulillah. So now, basically, this first half of the 21st century, the Ummah is going to come back to its real, full understanding of what Islam as a deen means, as a complete way of life, as a system of life, as a system of governance that creates social justice in society. Because Islam is a governing system, it's a political system. It has a religion inside it, but it's not a religion. It's a full political system that has a religion inside it.
So, Sheikh, you mentioned that the Ummah went through an awakening in the past and will go through an awakening.
It is going, alhamdulillah, right now.
Yeah.
It's the beginning. I see ourselves right now in the 1950s, the late 1950s, stuff like that. So we need 10, 15 years, inshallah, the Ummah will basically make a big breakthrough. We can see it, we can feel it.
So, Sheikh, you mentioned the masked Arabs before, and there is statements that people saying that they are, plants, Houthis, and stuff like that. But again, the sentiment is there, right? The concept of that the Ummah is going on the wrong track, and now we need to awaken this Ummah. So, how does the Ummah at large differentiate between genuine figures who are working to awaken the Ummah and Muslims are working to awaken the Ummah versus those who are actually manipulated by external forces in the Muslim world?
Well, first of all, before we get into basically like differentiating between Western-backed actors and real sincere leaders within the Ummah, we need to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best planners. For example, the Iranian Revolution we know for a fact that basically CIA was behind it. That Iranian Revolution played a big role also in creating this awakening within the Ummah, for people to basically see Islam as something that can basically govern people, lead to justice, lead some form of resisting oppression in general, without getting into details, because we don't agree with the Iranian revolutions or its supporters. But so it's like God plans things. You see what I'm saying? Like in the 1967 war, the 1970. So things happen within the Ummah that God plans, that basically creates. Today, for example, nobody would have even thought that what would happen in Gaza would lead to such a big awakening. Brother, there's non-Muslims who looked at what's happening in Gaza and became Muslim. Imagine that non-Muslims, people just in America, they look at what's happening in Gaza, they became Muslim. Imagine what Muslims went through. But see, right now it's in the depth of the hearts and minds, and that's why going back to your question, it does take a lot of political awareness to be able to differentiate between agents to the West and to the colonial powers, who might use slogans that tickle the imagination of the Ummah and the real sincere leaders. And that's why it's very important for us to invest in the political awareness of the Ummah. That's why basically we have this podcast. We need to invest in the political awareness of the Ummah. Because sadly, to be honest, we look at Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Everybody believed that he was a great leader. Turned out to basically be a British agent, and so forth. Like, he's the biggest Islamic hater. Yeah. People rallied around him for years to enable him. The Ummah enabled him because they trusted him. One of them, the most famous poet of the last century, and one of the most famous poets in maybe all of the Arab history, Ahmad Shawqi. He at the beginning, he basically wrote a whole poem praising Mustafa Kemal. He compared him to Khalid bin Walid and so forth. It was craziness. And at a later time in his life, he recognized that he's an agent, and he wrote another poem apologizing and cursing him. Jamal Abdel Nasser, he tricked people until today. Lawrence of Arabia tricked people for until basically he broke the Muslim world. We need to understand, like today, for example, Al-Julani is another CIA agent. People have a problem swallowing that. But bit by bit, people are realizing, what's happening? Like the guy had a one-on-one with Trump. Macron didn't have that maybe, like he had a one-on-one. It wasn't just an official delegation. But the Ummah is sadly still politically unaware of how things work. That's why we get tricked all the time. The problem with political unawareness is that a whole generation could be sacrificed. And that's why what we're doing here is super important.
So, Sheikh, drawing this podcast to a close, final message for Eid, for the Muslims, right? Like, what unifying, inspiring message can we offer the Muslims for Eid al-Adha? Linking sacrifice, resilience, and hope to current events, the example of the prophets and their prophetic way. Like, what message do you have for the viewers?
Well, from a geopolitical perspective, basically, al-Hajj brings back the whole Ummah together. And Muslims need to understand it's not an option. It's not like a recommendation of God for us to be united. It's an obligation for the 57 Muslim countries to be unified under one political entity, one border, one leadership. It's an obligation. It's the greatest obligation. And we will continue to be weak. We will continue to be subservient. We will continue to be backward. We will continue to have an economic, we're going to have economic poverty and scientific backwardness unless we cooperate and we unify together, just like we do in Hajj, but from a country to country perspective.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh.
God bless you. Allah barak feekum.
All right, guys, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share these videos because, again, as we said, as Sheikh mentioned, political awareness, knowledge is power, is key to awakening this ummah to the next awakening, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll see you on the next episode of i3 Pulse. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.